My name is Caleb Mitchell. I'm a substitute teacher at a local middle school in the suburbs of New Jersey, where I live with my wife, Olivia, and our two kids, Ava and Ethan, who are 12 and 10. My life used to be pretty ordinary. We had the house, the family, the weekend barbecues, the school drop-offs, your typical suburban dream. But behind the scenes, things were far from perfect. Olivia is a doctor. It sounds like the ultimate blessing, right? A successful career, a partner who saves lives. But that dedication to her job became the wedge that slowly split our lives apart. At first, it was just late nights and occasional weekend shifts. I chalked it up to the demands of her career. I was proud to support her. She was helping people, after all. But over the years, the late nights turned into weekend conferences, and the warmth between us started to cool. The spark we once had flickered out like a candle in a storm. It wasn't just the hours. Olivia became distant, secretive even. We went from having lively dinner conversations to silence. I'd find her texting late at night, her phone always angled away from me. When I'd ask about her day, I'd get vague answers or forced smiles. She was there physically, but mentally, she was miles away. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the stress of her job was just taking its toll. I buried my doubts deep, ignoring that gnawing feeling in my gut. Until one day, I couldn't ignore it anymore. That's when I found out the truth. It wasn't just the hospital she was staying late for, it was someone else. Olivia was having an affair. I still remember the day everything came crashing down. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those rare days when Olivia was home. She'd said she was catching up on paperwork in her office. I didn't think much of it until her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced at the screen out of habit, expecting some routine work text, but what I saw made my blood run cold. A message preview from someone named S. It read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." My hands trembled as I grabbed the phone, adrenaline pumping. The message thread was open, and I scrolled back through their conversation. My heart pounded with each word. It wasn't just the one person. There were multiple names, some familiar people from her hospital, some even women. But what stung the most was the sheer casualness of it all. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. For a moment, I stood there, frozen in disbelief. My mind was racing, bouncing between anger, heartbreak, and a nauseating sense of betrayal. I wanted to storm into her office, confront her, demand an explanation. But then something unexpected happened. I didn't. Instead, a strange calm washed over me. Maybe it was the writer in me, but as I stared at those messages, I realized something. Olivia had just handed me a story so full of lies, deceit, and betrayal that it was almost perfect material for my novels. You see, I had a side hobby that no one really knew about. I wrote romance novels in my spare time under a pen name. It was just a small project, something I'd do late at night when the kids were asleep. I even streamed my writing sessions on Twitch, where a handful of followers would tune in. And now, it felt like my life had turned into the exact kind of drama I'd been writing about for years. So, instead of confronting Olivia, I quietly slipped her phone back where I found it. I didn't say a word. I didn't yell or scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and began typing. Each affair became a chapter. Every lie she told became a twist in the plot. And with every keystroke, my anger turned into something else, fuel. Olivia was no longer just my cheating wife. She was inspiration. Little did she know, I had begun writing the final chapter of our marriage. In the days that followed, I fell into a routine. I played the part of the unsuspecting husband perfectly. I still made breakfast for the kids, dropped them off at school, smiled at Olivia when she walked through the door late at night. But inside, I was a ticking bomb, waiting for the right moment to go off. The novel I was working on took a dark turn. What had once been a story of love and redemption had now morphed into a tale of betrayal and revenge. Every time I sat down to write, I poured my anger and pain into the pages. It was cathartic in a twisted way, taking control of a story that mirrored my reality. But writing wasn't enough. I needed more than just fictional closure. I needed to know everything. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. It felt surreal, like I was a character in my own twisted plot. The investigator, a gruff man named Greg, took the job without asking too many questions. Within days, he started feeding me details, photos, dates, places Olivia had been when she said she was working. The worst part? The affairs weren't just with women from the hospital. Olivia's escapades extended further than I ever imagined. There were dinners, hotel rooms, and secret meetings. With every update Greg sent me, the list of people she was involved with grew longer. At first, I was numb to it. Then, with each new revelation, the numbness gave way to a burning desire for payback. I remember the night Greg sent me a series of photos that made my stomach churn. Olivia wasn't just seeing women anymore, there was a man in the mix. The pictures showed them together, laughing outside a hotel, entering a room. They looked comfortable, like they had done this many times before. That was the final nail in the coffin. It was one thing when her affairs were with women, something I had, in my own way, rationalized. But seeing her with another man brought a new level of betrayal. It broke me in ways I didn't think were possible. In my mind, this was no longer about a failing marriage. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about making her feel the same pain she had inflicted on me. That's when I decided I wouldn't just end things quietly. No, I needed something bigger, something fitting for the magnitude of her betrayal. She had turned our life into a farce, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. I started brainstorming, jotting down ideas late into the night, fueled by the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Revenge wasn't just a fantasy anymore. It was becoming a plan. The final chapter was writing itself, and this time, it wouldn't just be fiction. The idea for my revenge came to me during one of my late-night Twitch streams. Usually, I'd spend those sessions writing and chatting with my small group of followers, answering questions about my novels and the creative process. But on this particular night, I was distracted, my mind far from the fictional world I'd created. Instead, I found myself venting to the chat about relationships without giving away too much detail. At some point, almost absent-mindedly, I typed, "What would you do if you found out your partner was cheating on you?" The responses were immediate. Some told me to leave, others suggested confronting her in a grand, dramatic fashion. But one comment caught my attention. "Catch her in the act. Film it. Make sure the whole world knows who she really is." It hit me like a bolt of lightning. It was radical, maybe even cruel, but it made perfect sense. Olivia had been living a double life, lying to everyone, including herself. There was no way she could talk her way out of hard evidence. The world needed to see her for who she really was, and I was going to make sure of it. Over the next few days, I started to plan meticulously. I bought small, discreet cameras and set them up around the house, nothing too obvious, but enough to capture everything I needed. I didn't know when the opportunity would come, but I wanted to be ready when it did. And then, just like that, Greg sent me the text I'd been waiting for. "Olivia's meeting him tomorrow. Your place." I felt my heart race as I read the words. This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for. I told Olivia I had an extra long day at school the next day, inventing a fictional teacher's meeting to cover my absence. She didn't ask any questions, just nodded with that same distracted look she'd been giving me for months. The next day, I left the house as usual, kissed the kids goodbye, and told them I'd be late. Once they were at school, I headed back to the house, parking around the corner, out of sight. I set up the cameras, each one positioned perfectly to catch her and her lover in the act. I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread as I waited in the shadows, my heart pounding with every minute that passed. Sure enough, within an hour, a sleek, black car pulled up in front of our house. I watched as Olivia and the man got out, laughing, completely unaware of the trap I had laid. They walked inside as if they owned the place, like they had done this 1,000 times before. The sheer audacity of it made my blood boil. I waited, giving them a few minutes to get comfortable. Then, with a deep breath, I unlocked the back door and quietly let myself in. I could hear them laughing from the living room. My pulse quickened as I walked down the hallway, phone in hand, the camera rolling. What I saw next sent a wave of rage through me like never before. There they were, Olivia and her lover, entangled on the couch, completely unaware of my presence. The image seared itself into my mind. The betrayal I'd rationalized for so long was now a living, breathing nightmare in front of me. I stepped forward, and when they finally noticed me, the look on Olivia's face was priceless. For a moment, everything froze. Olivia's eyes went wide with shock as she scrambled off the couch, her face flushed with panic. The man fumbled, trying to gather his clothes, his hands shaking as he realized what was happening. But I didn't say a word, just stood there, phone in hand, recording everything. "Don't stop on my account," I said, my voice cold, steady. "This is for the world to see." Olivia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at me like a deer caught in headlights, trapped and terrified. She stammered something, maybe an apology, maybe an excuse I couldn't even tell. I was done listening to her lies. The man, now half-dressed, tried to say something too. He mumbled an apology, but I cut him off with a sharp glare. I wasn't interested in his guilt or his remorse. I wanted them both to feel the weight of their betrayal. "You think you can just sneak around and live a double life?" I said, stepping closer. "You think you can break everything we've built and get away with it?" Olivia's face crumpled, tears forming in her eyes. "Caleb, please." But I didn't let her finish. I raised my phone higher, making sure to get her full reaction on camera. "No more lies. No more pretending. This is over." She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. The man was already halfway to the door, desperate to escape the mess he'd found himself in. I didn't care if he ran. This wasn't about him. This was about Olivia and the perfect end to the story she had written for us. Without another word, I walked out of the house, the cool air hitting my face as I stepped into the driveway. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I climbed into my car, pulled out my laptop, and uploaded the video straight to my Twitch channel with the title, "The Final Chapter." Within minutes, the video was live. My small community of followers was already buzzing, sharing it, commenting on it, spreading it like wildfire. The very platform where I had once streamed my novels had now become the stage for my revenge, the final twist in a real-life story more dramatic than anything I could have ever written. As the views began to climb, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. Olivia had been exposed for who she really was. There would be no coming back from this. Her coworkers, her friends, her family, they'd all see the truth. By the next day, the video had gone viral. My inbox was flooded with messages, my Twitch account gaining followers by the minute. People I hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out, shocked, gossiping. The sweetest part? Olivia couldn't hide. She had spent years crafting a perfect image of herself, the dedicated doctor, the loving wife and mother. But now, that image was shattered, and everyone saw the reality beneath. The morning after I uploaded the video, the ripple effect began. I woke up to hundreds of notifications, texts, emails, social media alerts. The video had gone viral overnight. Friends, acquaintances, and complete strangers had all seen it. By lunchtime, people in our town were whispering, gossiping about Olivia's double life. The calls started coming in. First, it was Olivia's family. Her mother left a long, tearful voicemail, pleading for an explanation. Her sister texted me, telling me I had gone too far, that I should have kept things private. But I wasn't interested in keeping secrets anymore. Olivia had spent years living behind a mask, and now, the whole world could see who she truly was. Then came the calls from her coworkers, nurses, doctors, people from the hospital she worked at, all of them shocked by what they had seen. Olivia's carefully constructed reputation was crumbling and fast. The hospital wasn't exactly thrilled with the scandal. She had been a respected physician, someone people trusted with their lives, but after the video, that trust was shattered. I heard through the grapevine that Olivia had been placed on leave while the hospital decided how to handle the fallout. They didn't need a public relations nightmare, and she had just become the center of one. For someone whose career had been her entire identity, it was a devastating blow. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The video didn't just expose her affair, it exposed the full extent of her lies. The hospital administrators weren't just concerned about her personal life. They started digging into her work schedule, asking questions about those weekend conferences and late-night shifts. It turned out Olivia had been using her job as a cover for years, manipulating her schedule to meet up with her lovers. The fallout at work was swift. She was suspended pending further investigation, and it wasn't long before I heard she'd lost her position entirely. Her medical career, the one thing she had always prioritized above everything else, was now in ruins. As for the kids, I kept them shielded from most of the chaos. Ava and Ethan were too young to understand the full story, but they knew something was wrong. Olivia had always been the one with a tight grip on their schedules, and suddenly, she was gone, disappearing for days at a time, trying to clean up the mess she had created. I made sure to be there for them, picking them up from school, cooking their favorite meals, distracting them with movies and board games. They didn't need to know all the details, but they sensed the shift. Eventually, Olivia tried to reach out. I'd ignored her calls and texts for days, but one afternoon she showed up at the house. She looked like a shadow of the woman I used to know, disheveled, her eyes puffy from crying. "Caleb, please, we need to talk," she begged, standing at the doorway like a stranger. I stared at her for a long moment, wondering how we had gotten here. She was no longer the woman I had fallen in love with, the one I had built a life with. She was just a liar who had destroyed everything for the sake of her own selfish desires. "I don't think there's anything left to say," I replied coldly. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care anymore. I had already made my peace with it. Olivia had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. There was no room for forgiveness, no chance at reconciliation. I shut the door, the final chapter closing on a life that no longer belonged to either of us. As for me, I was moving forward. The divorce papers were ready, and soon I'd be free of her for good. The viral fame from the video had brought a surprising amount of attention to my writing. People were asking for more, wanting to hear the whole story behind the final chapter. For the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The weight of Olivia's lies was gone, and I was ready to start over. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It wasn't just about ending my marriage to Olivia, it was about closing the door on a chapter of my life that had been filled with deception and betrayal. I had been living in her shadow for years, letting her secrets poison every corner of our lives. But now, I was free. The media attention surrounding the viral video had died down, but the ripple effect it created in my personal life hadn't. My Twitch followers had grown exponentially, and my small, private community had turned into something much larger. People were still messaging me, asking about the story, curious about how things ended. Some were even asking for advice on their own troubled relationships. The irony wasn't lost on me, people looking to me, a man who had lived through the worst kind of heartbreak, for guidance on love and trust. But I didn't mind. If anything, it made me realize that through all the pain and betrayal, I had come out stronger, sharper. The revenge may have started as a way to reclaim my dignity, but in the end, it had given me a new sense of purpose. I decided to take a break from writing romance novels. After everything I'd been through, the genre didn't hold the same allure for me anymore. Instead, I pivoted into something new, writing about the darker side of relationships, betrayal, manipulation, heartbreak, things I now knew intimately. And to my surprise, people ate it up. As the weeks went by, I found myself enjoying the quiet moments again. The kids and I settled into a new routine, and while they still asked about their mom, they seemed to adjust better than I had expected. Olivia had been granted limited visitation, but for the most part, it was just the three of us now: me, Ava, and Ethan. One evening, after I had put the kids to bed, I sat on the back porch with a glass of whiskey, staring out into the quiet night. The stars were bright, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. I reflected on everything that had happened, and it hit me that revenge hadn't been the real victory. The real victory was in reclaiming my life, on my terms. I had been pushed to the edge, forced to confront the ugly truths of my marriage, and yet here I was stronger, wiser, and surprisingly content. Olivia's lies had nearly destroyed me, but they had also set me free. As I sat there, the cool breeze washing over me, I realized that life had handed me something far better than revenge: a second chance, a new beginning. And this time, I was going to write the story my way. No more lies, no more betrayal, just a future built on truth, strength, and the lessons I had learned along the way. Discover more stories. Subscribe today.